What happens when Hollywood's most respected actor decides he's had enough of late-night television's fake smiles and scripted controversies? You won't believe what unfolds when Denzel Washington sits down with Jimmy Kimmel for what was supposed to be a standard promotional appearance, only to witness one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two powerhouses clash on live television. Last night's episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live started like any other, with the familiar opening monologue and the usual Hollywood Boulevard theater packed with an unsuspecting audience. But what they witnessed would go down as one of the most shocking moments in television history. Denzel Washington, there to promote his latest directorial project, walked onto that stage with something clearly weighing on his mind. The tension was palpable from the moment he shook Kimmel's hand. That usual warm embrace between host and guest was notably absent, replaced by a firm, almost confrontational grip that lasted just a beat too long. Kimmel, ever the showman, tried to mask the awkwardness with his signature nervous laughter, but even the most casual viewer could sense something was off. "Denzel Washington, everybody." "The legend himself," Kimmel announced to thunderous applause, but Washington's response was measured, almost cold. He settled into his chair with the posture of a man who had come to settle a score, not promote a movie. "Great to be here, Jimmy," Washington said, though his tone suggested otherwise. The camera caught every micro-expression, every slight tightening around his eyes that hinted at the storm brewing beneath the surface. Kimmel, perhaps sensing the shift in energy, dove straight into his prepared questions about Washington's new film, but it was clear from the beginning that this wasn't going to be the typical softball interview his publicists had arranged. "So tell us about this new project," Kimmel began, leaning forward with that manufactured enthusiasm that has become his trademark. "I understand it deals with some pretty heavy themes about integrity and entertainment." Washington paused, a knowing smile creeping across his face that sent an immediate chill through the studio. "Integrity in entertainment," he repeated slowly, letting each word hang in the air like a challenge. "That's interesting that you'd bring that up, Jimmy. Real interesting timing." The audience, still caught up in the excitement of seeing a Hollywood icon, laughed nervously, unsure if they were witnessing banter or something more serious. Kimmel's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, barely perceptible to most, but Washington caught it, and so did the cameras. "Well, I mean, that's what the film's about, right?" Kimmel deflected, shuffling through his note cards with slightly trembling hands. "Your character faces some tough moral choices in the industry." "My character," Washington nodded thoughtfully, "faces the choice between staying quiet about corruption or speaking truth to power." Sound familiar? The words cut through the studio like a blade, and suddenly the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Kimmel forced another laugh, but it came out strangled, desperate. "I'm not sure I follow." "Oh, I think you follow just fine," Washington shot back, his voice steady but loaded with an intensity that made everyone in the studio sit up straighter. "See, Jimmy, I've been in this business for over 4 decades. I've seen the games, the politics, the way people get silenced when they start asking the right questions." The audience was now completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't the usual celebrity chat they'd come expecting. This was something raw, something real, and something potentially explosive. Kimmel, clearly rattled but trying to maintain control, attempted to steer the conversation back to safer territory. "Well, let's talk about your character's journey in the film." "Let's talk about your journey, Jimmy," Washington interrupted, his voice cutting through Kimmel's attempt at deflection like a hot knife through butter. "Let's talk about how a comedian becomes a mouthpiece for narratives that don't serve the people watching at home." The studio fell into a silence so profound that the hum of the cameras became audible. Kimmel's face flushed red, and his usually quick wit seemed to abandon him entirely. I'm not sure what you're getting at, Denzel." Washington leaned forward, his eyes boring into Kimmel's with an intensity that made the host visibly uncomfortable. "What I'm getting at is that people are waking up, Jimmy. They're seeing through the smoke screens, the distractions, the carefully manufactured controversies designed to keep them from asking the real questions." "Look, if this is about something specific," Kimmel began, his voice cracking slightly under the pressure. "Specific?" Washington laughed. but there was no humor in it. How about we get specific about why your show is getting canceled? How about we talk about the ratings freefall? The advertisers pulling out? The fact that people are tired of being fed bullshit disguised as entertainment? The words hit the studio like a thunderclap. Kimmel's face went from red to pale in seconds, and you could practically hear the collective gasp from the audience. This wasn't just an awkward interview anymore. This was a public execution, and everyone in that room knew they were witnessing television history in the making. But Washington wasn't done. Not even close. As the implications of his words sank in, and as Kimmel struggled to formulate a response that could possibly salvage this situation, the legendary actor prepared to deliver the knockout punch that would leave everyone speechless and set the stage for an even more explosive confrontation. Washington's eyes narrowed as he watched Kimmel squirm in his chair, the host's usual cockiness evaporating like morning mist. "You want to know what's really specific, Jimmy?" Washington's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more weight than if he'd been shouting. "The fact that your own network executives are in meetings right now, discussing your replacement. The fact that your relevance died years ago, but you've been too busy kissing ass and playing politics to notice." Kimmel's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The color had completely drained from his face, and beads of sweat were forming on his forehead under the studio lights. "Denzel, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding here." "Misunderstanding?" Washington's voice rose just enough to cut through Kimmel's pathetic attempt at damage control. "The only misunderstanding is how you thought you could keep fooling people forever. How you thought nobody would notice that your show has become nothing more than a propaganda machine for the same corporate interests that are destroying this country." The audience sat in stunned silence, their heads turning back and forth between the two men, like spectators at the most brutal tennis match ever played. Some pulled out their phones, desperately trying to capture what they instinctively knew was going to be viral gold within hours. Kimmel, his voice shaking now, tried one more desperate deflection. "Look, I think we should probably take a commercial break and—" "No fucking commercial break," Washington snapped, his composure finally cracking enough to let real anger bleed through. "You don't get to control this narrative, Jimmy. Not this time. For once in your miserable career, you're going to sit there and hear some goddamn truth." The profanity hit the studio like a physical blow. This was live television, and one of Hollywood's most respected actors had just dropped an F-bomb on network TV. The production team in the booth was probably having cardiac episodes, but Washington couldn't have cared less. "You want to talk about my movie?" Washington continued, his voice gaining momentum like a freight train. "My movie is about a man who discovers that everything he believed about his industry was a lie. About how the people he trusted were selling out the very audience that made them rich. Sound fucking familiar yet, Jimmy?" Kimmel was visibly trembling now, his hands gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "Denzel, please, can we just what? Pretend this conversation never happened? Pretend that your show isn't circling the drain? Pretend that half your writing staff hasn't already started looking for new jobs?" Washington leaned back in his chair with the confidence of a man holding all the cards. "I've got news for you, Jimmy. The game is over. The curtain's been pulled back, and everyone can see the pathetic little man behind it." The silence in the studio was deafening. You could hear someone in the audience nervously clear their throat, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the oppressive quiet. Kimmel's eyes darted toward the cameras, then to his producers off stage, searching desperately for someone to throw him a lifeline that wasn't coming. "I've been doing this for 40 years, Washington continued, his voice steady as granite. "I've worked with legends. I've seen empires rise and fall, and I can smell a sinking ship from a mile away. Your ship isn't just sinking, Jimmy. It's already underwater, and you're too arrogant to admit you're drowning." Kimmel finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. "Why are you doing this?" Washington's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Why am I doing this? Because somebody has to. Because I'm tired of watching good people get destroyed while spineless cowards like you profit from their misery. Because your cancellation isn't just about ratings. It's about accountability." "My cancellation isn't confirmed," Kimmel said weakly, grasping for any shred of dignity he could salvage. "Isn't it?" Washington's smile was predatory now. "Then explain why your biggest advertisers have been quietly pulling their contracts. Explain why your time slot is being eyed by 3 different production companies. Explain why your own network won't return your agent's calls. Each word was like a dagger thrust, and Kimmel was bleeding out in front of millions of viewers. His breathing had become shallow and rapid, and sweat was now visibly dripping down his face. This wasn't just a professional assassination. This was a complete and total annihilation of everything Kimmel had built his career on. You built your entire persona on being the everyman, Washington continued mercilessly. The guy who speaks for regular people. But you don't speak for regular people, Jimmy. You speak for boardrooms. You speak for corporate interests. You speak for everyone except the people stupid enough to still watch this train wreck of a show. The audience was completely silent now, many of them looking uncomfortable, as if they were witnessing something they shouldn't be seeing. This had gone far beyond entertainment. This was raw, brutal, and completely unfiltered. Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to regain control. I think we really should go to commercial. Washington stood up slowly, deliberately, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the now cowering host. You know what, Jimmy? You're absolutely right. We should go to commercial. Because what I'm about to say next is going to end your career permanently, and I want to make sure every single person watching understands exactly what kind of person you really are. The threat hung in the air like a loaded weapon, and as the tension reached its absolute breaking point, everyone in that studio knew they were about to witness something that would change television forever. Washington's voice dropped to a deadly calm that was somehow more terrifying than any shouting could have been. You want to know what kind of man you really are, Jimmy? You're the kind of man who sells out his own principles for a paycheck. You're the kind of man who looks America in the eye every night and lies through his teeth because it's profitable. Kimmel was now visibly shaking, his entire body trembling as if he were sitting in sub-zero temperatures. Denzel, please. I have a family. You have nothing? Washington cut him off with surgical precision. Your family? They're embarrassed by you. Your colleagues? They're already distancing themselves. Your legacy? You just destroyed it in front of millions of people by showing everyone exactly how weak and pathetic you really are. The words hit Kimmel like physical blows. Tears were actually forming in his eyes now, his career and reputation being systematically demolished by one of the most respected men in Hollywood. The audience watched in horrified fascination as their host, usually so confident and in control, was reduced to a quivering mess. I know about the meetings, Jimmy, Washington continued, circling in for the kill. I know about the executives who laugh at you behind your back. I know about the focus groups that can't stand you. I know about the internal memos calling you a liability to the network's credibility. Stop, Kimmel whispered, his voice barely audible. Please, just stop. Stop? Washington's voice rose with righteous fury. Like you stopped when you were told to push narratives that hurt real people? Like you stopped when you were asked to destroy the careers of anyone who dared to think differently? You didn't stop then. So why the fuck should I stop now? The profanity echoed through the studio like a thunderclap. This was completely uncharted territory for network television. Washington was burning every bridge, breaking every rule, and he clearly didn't give a damn about the consequences. You represent everything that's wrong with this industry, Washington continued relentlessly. You're a coward who hides behind writers and producers and corporate handlers because you don't have an original thought in your empty head. You're a puppet, Jimmy. A fucking puppet. And everyone can see the strings. Kimmel tried to stand up, perhaps thinking he could somehow end this nightmare. But Washington's commanding presence forced him back down into his chair like a scolded child. Sit the fuck down, Washington commanded with such authority that Kimmel immediately complied. I'm not finished with you yet. See, this isn't just about your show getting canceled. This is about justice. This is about accountability for all the damage you've done, all the people you've hurt, all the trust you've betrayed. The silence in the studio was now absolute. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, afraid to move and break the spell of this incredible moment. This wasn't just television anymore. This was a reckoning. I agree with the decision to cancel your show, Washington declared, each word hitting like a hammer blow. Not because of ratings, not because of money, but because you don't deserve the platform you've abused for so long. You don't deserve the trust people placed in you. You don't deserve to call yourself an entertainer when all you do is spread poison. Kimmel's face was now streaked with tears, his carefully constructed public persona completely shattered. I was just trying to do my job. Your job? Washington's laugh was harsh and mocking. Your job was to entertain people, to bring them joy, to maybe make them think. Instead, you became a propaganda minister for interests that see your audience as nothing more than consumer data points. Washington began moving toward the edge of the stage, clearly preparing to make his exit, but he wasn't done delivering his verdict. You know what the real tragedy is, Jimmy. You had everything. Talent, opportunity, a platform that could have made a real difference in people's lives. And you pissed it all away because you were too weak to stand up for what's right. Please, Kimmel begged, his voice breaking completely. Don't do this. I'm not doing anything, Washington replied coldly. You did this to yourself. Every compromise you made, every principle you abandoned, every time you chose profit over people, that's what did this. I'm just the messenger. The legendary actor paused at the edge of the stage, turning back for one final devastating blow. Your show is getting canceled because it deserves to be canceled. Because you've forgotten what entertainment is supposed to be about. Because you've lost the respect of everyone who ever believed in you. And most importantly, because people like me are done staying quiet while people like you destroy everything we've worked to build. Washington's voice rose to a crescendo that filled every corner of the studio. This industry will be better without your show. Television will be better without your voice. And America will be better without your lies. With that, Denzel Washington turned his back on Jimmy Kimmel and walked off the stage with the dignity and authority of a man who had just delivered the performance of a lifetime. His footsteps echoed through the stunned silence as he disappeared behind the curtain, leaving behind a broken host, a shocked audience, and a moment that would be replayed millions of times across every social media platform in existence. Kimmel sat alone in his chair, tears streaming down his face, his career in ruins, his legacy destroyed. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of his humiliation for posterity. The audience sat in complete silence, unsure whether to applaud, boo, or simply flee the scene of this incredible destruction. What had started as a simple promotional interview had become the most explosive confrontation in television history. Denzel Washington had spoken truth to power, and power had crumbled before America's eyes. The king of late-night television had been dethroned by a man who refused to play the game anymore, and television would never be the same again.